Hi, I'm Jeff Hajek, the owner and founder of Valaction. This video is part of my Lean training system. It was originally released as a DVD a long time ago, but times have changed, and the look of some of these LTS videos is now a bit dated. The content is still spot on though, so rather than just discontinue the line, I am posting the majority of each of the 36 videos here, with the remainder available at Valaction Videos. That's our video service where you can download a wealth of supporting content and watch subscriber-only videos. I recommend subscribing and hitting the notification button if you want to make sure you don't miss any new content. I would also really appreciate if you would hit the like button if this video is helpful and you want to see more content similar to it. The like button helps us get found on YouTube, but it also lets us figure out where you want us to put our future effort. Now enjoy the free version of this video. Hello, my name is Jeff Hajek. I am the founder and owner of Valaction Continuous Improvement and the author of What Do You Mean I Gotta Be Lean? I'm also a consultant and a corporate trainer on lean and other continuous improvement principles. So that's what we'll be doing today, is we'll be talking a little bit about daily management and how we can really use that as a way of making an organization operate more smoothly. So about this presentation, like I said, it's on a webinar, but it's done with animations on a PowerPoint package. So you may see a little bit of the animation a little bit glitchy as it comes across the screen, and that's just a function of being broadcast back and forth around the world. So that doesn't show up in the PowerPoint packages. And I am recording this one, so I ask that, it is copyrighted material, so I ask that you don't record or distribute it. The stuff is all available though on my website. So now let's get into it. The objectives of today is really to understand the purpose of what daily management is. And daily management, and like I said, I'll get into more of the details, but it's a way of providing structure to how you run your operation. And it also creates this link between the top-level strategy and what the people at the front line are doing. And then you can figure out how to make improvements to link those two things together more cohesively, so everything that's being done in your organization is really tied to what you want the direction of the company tied to the direction you want the company to go in. So a good place to start is really to talk about how work flows in and out. And for most of the stuff, I'll be talking about stuff in the office because it's the more complicated of the two situations that you'll face. But work flows the same way whether it's in the office or on the shop floor. On the shop floor, you just have a much more stable way of production, and that's done really back in the office. When you start getting production schedules and Heijunka, which is load leveling, you start seeing a more consistent demand to the shop floor. But you still have this idea of work flows in and out of your organization or of your team, whether you're on the shop floor or in the office. But in the office, what you'll face is you come in, and let's use emails as an example. When you walk into your office in the morning, you have a pile of emails in your inbox, and these could be customer, customer requests, or for new information or whatever the type of information is that is coming in. It could be a single person's queue, or it could be something like a support line. We have a lot of work coming in. But anyway you look at it, there's going to be a pile of work when the team is not there, and the pile is going to have some number of items in it when the team shows up. And that number is going to keep changing throughout the day, so you're going to keep getting new stuff in, and then you'll be working on the product or whatever it is, and you'll be getting that out of the office. So as work comes in, obviously your queue gets bigger, and then as you do the work, you pull stuff out of that queue. So this queue is this very dynamic situation, and this is just an animation issue here, but I always recommend pulling from first in, first out. In this case, it's whatever is it's basically last in, first out as you watch this animation go. But in a regular inbox, you'll be pulling from the oldest stuff first, and you want to make sure that you don't start jumping things out of sequence, so you're running into a whole different set of problems. Now, occasionally, as you start doing your work throughout the day, you're going to find that you're going to get ahead, and the pile is going to get smaller. But a more typical situation is this pile continues to grow and continues to grow and continues to grow, and it gets bigger and bigger, and you never really know exactly where you are. And by that I mean you have a gut feel of this is a big pile, but you don't know for sure how big is it going to be at the end of the day. So you start thinking ahead and say, it's getting close to 3 o'clock here, and we've got maybe 2 hours left before the end of the workday. Are we going to be able to get this pile down to 0 and meet our customer expectations? So in this case, you just don't know. The question is, are you going to be able to meet that demand? And that's really what this is all about, is being able to find out how can you match what the customers expect of you. And the problem in the office, and this happens less frequently in the shop floor when things are linked together, but in the office, because of the dynamic loading that people face, one day's busy, one day's not so busy, you seem to have this thing that I've termed Hajek's Law of office work. And effectively what it means is when the pile's bigger, people work faster. When the pile's smaller, they work slower. And it's really a function of people pacing themselves because they know they can't keep a breakneck speed all the time. So as the work changes around them, they try to pace themselves to make them get what they need to do done by the end of the day. And it's a way of self-preservation. It's a very, very natural response to it. So there's nothing wrong or nothing is a problem about this. What it really is that it's just a function of how it's just a function of how people behave in a situation when there's a lot of pressure on them. So don't look at this as like a negative thing. It's just the way things are. And your goal in daily management is to be able to take that load off of people so they're not having to do that breakneck speed when things are getting busy and not having to feel like they're wasting time when things aren't. So that's really what daily management will do for you.
I hope you are getting something valuable out of this video. If you want to get more out of this program, we recommend watching it on Valaction Videos. You'll be able to watch the entire video, mostly ad-free, and view subscriber-only programs. You'll also have access to a load of continuous improvement downloads.
Now, daily management, the term management is closely aligned to leadership, and in any level of your organization, people have some leadership functions. And in Lean, there's some very clearly defined types of jobs that people have to do. So the first one is setting the strategy. And part of Lean, when you talk strategy deployment, is charting the big picture course for the company. And most people know that that's the job of the executives. And that should be the main job of the executives. They should be putting most of their effort into developing strategies. And of course, you want to have middle management helping them out. But that's not their primary function. And these numbers and this chart may vary a little bit based on what the needs of your organization are. But the bottom line is that the executives have the bulk of the strategic effort and middle managers help them out. But what middle managers do, they're the ones who are really focusing on the goals and breakthroughs. So when the executives come up with a new plan where they want to increase market share in a certain location, or they want to change their supplier network, or whatever they come up with as a plan on the strategy, the middle managers are the ones who have to make that happen. And that often entails coming up with a new way of doing business. Now, the new way of doing business is you're coming up with the big breakthroughs and doing the goals, but there's also, let me back up a second. The goals and breakthroughs, like the executives for strategy, you want to have help from both the frontline leaders and the executives. So the middle managers don't do it in a vacuum. When they come up with these goals and objectives, they want to have help from the people up and down. And you'll see that as a common thing of leadership is, you work with people a level up and a level down from you to really come up with a good picture of what you should do. But when you get those goals and objectives set, the next function, next thing that you do is you look at how are you going to make those things come to pass. So you set these goals, but you actually have to make the changes, and those changes are really Kaizen. And most people have a hand in Kaizen. So middle managers should be doing some Kaizen. Executives should be involved because it keeps them connected with their operation. And frontline employees should be doing a lot of it, but this is really the primary function of frontline leaders. And now when I say Kaizen is a leadership function, what I'm really saying is people are making decisions that is going to drive how work is done. So the decisions you're making in the Kaizen really is a leadership decision that you're making. You're deciding how the rest of the team is going to be doing the work in the future. So Kaizen is actually a leadership function. And what this leaves here is daily management. Now, daily management is the way of deciding what to do on a moment-to-moment basis to keep the operation flowing smoothly. And these decisions are frequently made from higher than they should be. So this is really the should-be situation for leadership in Lean. Often what you'll have is everybody will be shifting down a little bit. So the frontline leaders are more focused on daily management. Middle managers are doing more of the Kaizen and trying to decide how to do the operation. And the executives are really getting involved more in the goal setting and trying to figure out the breakthroughs rather than developing strategy. So this is the should-be picture. And what we're talking about today is really the daily management piece of this leadership role.
As part of the Lean training system this video comes from, we offer a variety of Lean Lego training packages. These include our Lean Lego flow simulation, mistake proofing or poka-yoke Lean Lego exercise, and our visual controls and 5S Lean Lego exercise. We've also got an office flow simulation for those not implementing continuous improvement on the shop floor. Click the links in the description below or click on cards that pop up on this video to learn more. We'll also add links at the end.
So daily management is just a systematic, fact-based, goal-oriented, yada, yada, yada. Don't really focus on this definition. What I want you to think of is that daily management is a PDCA cycle. It's done every day on how you manage your work. So you start out with planning out the daily demand and the capacity, figuring out if you have enough, taking your countermeasures to act on that. Then you actually run your day. You start going and doing your production, and you check it intermittently throughout the day to see where you are. And anytime you're off the path, off the target, you act on that information. And then you create a new plan and you continue the cycle throughout the day. And the reason you do this is to really get a structured way of looking at your day. And the structure really does a couple things for you. The first is it helps with the communication. And time again in studies about job satisfaction, having communication, having information raises the satisfaction of frontline employees. So understanding this, they're going to see this board, they're going to think it's big. The first thoughts is this is like a big brother, somebody's tracking me and watching me. But what they're going to quickly find out is that daily management is a way of helping them understand what's going on, getting clear information about what the expectations are, and they're going to like it. And most people who get working under a daily management system actually find that it helps them out. So there's an initial reaction and there's actual reactions that people have when they understand what it is. But the structure also provides this the safety net that makes sure that nothing falls through the cracks, because you're looking at things consistently, and it's not in the same way of looking at it as you might be today, where it's a lot of effort to look at things and find things out. Because the system makes that information very apparent, it's a very quick look, and you can come up with a quick answer to any questions you might have. So this is a good way of structuring your daily operation. The other thing that it does is it forces a very active style of leadership. And this means that you don't have managers or frontline leaders who are off doing their own things. They have to be tied in to what the team is doing. But the team is really doing a lot of self-management, but the leaders are really checking in and managing the exceptions and managing the processes that support the team, rather than managing how to do what's going on in a momentary basis. So this active side of leadership also requires that leaders are down in Gemba. And I generally shy away from using the Japanese terms for lean unless it makes a lot of sense to do it. And in this case, I say Gemba makes a lot of sense because it's a very specific term that doesn't have a really good English equivalent, because Gemba means the actual place where the actual work is taking place. And it's really hard to say that in one word, because if you just say the workplace or the shop floor, it doesn't necessarily mean the same thing. So going to the shop floor is very different than saying going to the shop floor at the location where the process that you're talking about is actually happening with the person who's doing it at the exact time. So Gemba really means that very specific point of looking at where the stuff is actually going on. So I use that one because it is much more efficient to say it that way. And again, if a term makes sense to use it, put it into your vocabulary, but don't feel like you have to use the Japanese terms just to be lean. Now, management by fact. The other thing that this does here is when you start making decisions based on a very structured approach, you start getting a lot of your team members backing you a lot more. So when you have this clear understanding of how you're going to make a decision as a leader, the team members now can predict what your decisions are going to be, and they're not going to be surprised by what they may consider erratic leadership or inconsistencies, because they understand exactly what's going to happen. And this builds up that consensus, and they feel like you know what you're doing because they see you're making the decisions based on fact. They figure that you're not guessing, and that builds a lot of confidence in the leadership. So as you do make, as you make more of your decisions by fact, when you do have to make a leap of faith and use your management's intuition, what you're going to find is that you're a lot more trusted because of all this credibility you've built up by managing by fact. So why do you want to use daily management? Well, The main reasons to use daily management is that it's a good way of tying what you're doing to the big picture. So as you start thinking about directions and lean and goals, there's a lot of talk about lean as reducing of waste and improving flow. But what I really think the biggest thing that lean brings to the table is it starts bringing this focus on the value and what's important and understanding why you're doing things. And to me, that drives a lot of the other things that you do in lean. So when you start focusing on this big picture view and you start having KPIs that tie into your corporate strategy, teams have a much better understanding of why they're important in the scheme of things. So they don't feel like they're just a cog in the wheel, the wheels of the machine. What they feel like is that they're an important part of the structure of how the business operates, and that if they don't do something, here's how the company's going to fail. And when you feel important, you're much more satisfied in your job. And you'll see that as a big theme of what I talk about. I think job satisfaction is a much, much, much underrated and underutilized tool in a manager's bag of tricks. And a satisfied, happy team is an effective team. And there's actually a lot of the studies, if you think about something like the Fortune magazine's Best Places to Work, what they find is that the top companies on that list greatly outperform the broader market, and it's not even close. If you take like there's a study that was done a little while ago, and I can't think of the guy's name right now. I wrote about it in my book, but he found that if you did a 5-year study on the returns of the companies that made the Fortune's Best Places to Work list, they got something like a 14% return versus an 8% return or 6% return for the broader market. It's about a little over double, and I can't remember the exact numbers, so don't quote me on those. I don't have it in front of me. But it's almost double, or it's a little over double of the returns between the best places and the broader market. So having this idea of feeling like you contribute and feeling satisfied in your job is there's a great return on that. The second thing is workload management, and this goes into that daily, that job satisfaction also. If people feel like the work that they're being asked to do is fair, they're much more likely to be satisfied in their job. And that's what daily management does, is it sets a clear target and it sets a clear expectation so people feel, in both directions that things are going well and fair. So, managers don't feel like their teams slow down when there's not a lot of work, and the teams don't feel like they're asked to do more than the standard when things get busy. And, understanding exactly where you are at any given time is really an important it's an important aspect of being in a business. The other thing that, on the PDCA cycle, that check and act is a big one, because what it does is it creates closure on problems. So this whole cycle of doing things every day and repetitively managing your operation and tracking what's causing you to fall off track, teams start to see the mechanics of how the work gets better and how process improved. And not only see it, but they get to participate in it. And that's a huge thing about feeling like you have some say in your job. And again, that goes back to the job satisfaction. And finally, communication. When a team member and a leader are on the same page, it basically just makes them much, obviously, there's not a lot to say about that. When they actually understand the same things and they have the same interpretation of the situation, the work goes more smoothly and you have less opportunity for conflicts. But there's also that whole idea of information equals satisfaction. And this goes back to that first one I was talking about. There's a big link between understanding what the goals of the company are and feeling like you're in the loop and job satisfaction. So again, daily management helps with all this job satisfaction as well as the operational performance of the team. Now in terms of performance patterns, what normally happens is people make improvements, and this is a typical type of improvement. You'll start seeing a gain, and this could be a Kaizen with its lasting improvements that come from that, and you'll see a drop-off as something slips or a machine breaks or starts to wear out. You start seeing the slide, and then another project will come along or something will change, and you'll see another big improvement in performance and another slide. You get a sawtooth pattern, and the trend is generally up, but you can see the problem is that you end up with a long period of time to get right back to where you were. And now what daily management does is it creates this stability. So instead of actually backsliding. As soon as things start to change, you identify that problem and you fix it right away. And that focus on the problems when they occur often results in even these little tiny incremental improvements. So in addition to the long-term gains you're making, you start seeing some of these small gradual improvements as people start getting really focused on daily improvements because of the daily management system. So what is daily management? I've talked all about that. When I talk about what it is, I've talked about the mechanics of it now. So I've talked a lot about the background of it. But when daily management comes down to is it's a big board on the wall, and you'll see a production board and a KPI board right next to it generally. What this does is it makes the way you run your business very visual. So the production board, let me back up. I'll get to what specifically the production board is in a minute. But I'm going to talk a little bit about who does what. Now the leaders really have the behind-the-scenes job here, and they're ones who are going to be training the teams up on how to do the production or the daily management board and production board, and they're going to be ones who are really managing all the background information and tracking it, and the big picture, databasing it and looking it over and parsing the information, and they're going to be going down and doing audits and things like that. So their stuff is really the behind-the-scenes look at it. The team members, on the other hand, are the ones who are doing the day-to-day stuff and keeping on top of things. So they're tracking, they're recording and tracking production, they're writing down and recording problems, and they're not just writing them down, they're helping to resolve those problems. And they're also, because they're now more keenly aware of where they should be, they're able to monitor the status of the operation much more quickly. And that monitoring and that feeling of I should let people know right away creates this early warning system whenever there's a problem. Instead of people just kind of sitting on information or not feeling like there's an outlet, daily management makes things happen much more quickly.
Get more out of our Lean Training System videos with our Continuous Improvement Companion. It's closing in on 1,000 pages of great content. It is currently available as a download with a subscription to Action Videos and as a license through our store. You can also get a free version of it by signing up for our newsletter. Click the links in the description below or click on the cards that pop up on this video to learn more. We'll also add links at the end.
And again, this is the production board. This is what I was talking about a minute ago. What it really is just a visual way of seeing where you are throughout the day. Now this board is a little bit truncated because I left off this delta section where you kind of track the differences between the plan and actual. It just makes it a little bit more readable on the presentation. But on your wall, you're going to want to have a delta also to show the differences to the plan. Now what this does is the production board operates basically on something called the central limit theorem. And there's all kinds of statistics behind it, but basically what it comes down to be is if I ask you how long your next piece of work would take, it's very likely you'd answer, oh, it depends, or it could be all over the map, and sometimes it's quick, sometimes it's long. But if I asked you how many pieces of work you'd get done in the next 3 hours or the next day, or your team would get done by lunchtime, when you look at a bigger picture, there's a lot less variation in that. And what happens is when you have these little distributions, when you pile these distributions into one bucket, you get more of a normal distribution where you start having some clustering around the center of it. And it makes sense. If you have the chance of having an extreme, you're going to get a bunch of extreme ones on the one-offs, but when you have a bunch of extremes, they start balancing out. And you can think about this like drawing cards. If I asked you to draw one card out of a pile, that card could be anywhere from 1 to 13 points, right? You could be looking at it, and a king is just as likely as a 2. But if I asked you to draw a poker hand and average them out, you're not going to have a whole lot of 4 kings and a queen, which would be the highest hand you could get. You're not going to have a lot of 4 aces and a 2, which would be the lowest hand. You're going to have some clustering around that 7, or the middle of the pack there. So your poker hand average is kind of the way I'd be looking at this. So instead of looking at work individually like you might on the shop floor with a very small window like attack time, as you get more variation in how the work comes in, you start putting into these time buckets. And these time buckets let you be more predictive. And now you're trading off a little bit of that precision from unit to unit to be more able to actually respond and to quit chasing your tail. So it's, in effect, you're creating a dampener on how you track problems and make sure that what's happening isn't just normal changes. So what you do is you go through and you look at the day and you say at 10 o'clock or whatever time you choose, this is how many I expect to have come in. And typically you're not going to have a smooth pattern, but if you look at your historicals, you're going to find that, maybe what you find is that at the beginning of the day you get a lot of work coming in. This might be a pattern that I would face on the West Coast where, by 10 o'clock I'm getting a lot of East Coast traffic, and it slows down throughout the day, and by 2:30 most of the time zones are already home, already just kind of wrapping the day up, so I get a lot less flow of work coming in. So you'll see this flow of work coming in, and then you decide based on your staffing how fast can you process that work. And in this case, you might have between the 12 and 2:30 hour, you might have people out on lunch, which would take down your numbers a little bit. What you end up with is knowing the start of the day of what you had in the pile when you first showed up for work. You can come up with a plan and say, this is what I think should be in the queue, and that's where you can manage your day. So you look at the end of the day and say, is 12 acceptable? And some people will say they want to make sure that everything's done the same day, and you want to have 0 at the end of the day. Some people have some number where they say if it's in by 12 o'clock, it has to be done the same day. So whatever you set up as your standard, that's how you want to be able to finish. But the key here is that you now know, given the conditions that you're facing, that you expect to face, where are you going to be at the end of the day? And as you go through the day, you track the actuals. So in this case, the demand coming in was pretty close, and again, you're going to see some variation. And depending on the nature of business, it might be higher, and you might want to use a little bit bigger windows, or it might be lower, and you might be able to do it more quickly depending on the size of your team. And again, just adjust that as needed. But in this case, you're a little off on the output because an employee came in late, and this was unplanned. So you now know that if you look at the end of the day, you're going to start being a little bit behind. So that little bit of a slowdown, you had a little less demand, but you also had a little less output. Your end of the day queue is now projected to be 14. But you now know this at 10 o'clock in the morning. And typically you might know this around 3 o'clock or 3:30 when you start counting things up and saying how are we going to be at the end of the day. So because you have this predictive nature of where you're going to be, you can now take actions earlier. And that's, again, the key of the production board is early warning and being able to respond to it. And, of course, now that you have the note of why there's a problem, you eliminate that time gap. So instead of saying we're off last week on a production was a problem, you don't have to go back and look for it. You know right away what happened.
This video comes from Velaction's Lean Training System, which takes a module-based approach to learning about continuous improvement. Modules include a PowerPoint presentation and student guides for every video, plus there are many exercises and quizzes as well. There's also a whole host of supporting content in the form of terms in our Continuous Improvement Companion and downloadable articles. Our modules are currently available in our store and as downloads at Velaction Videos. Click the links in the description below or click on the cards that pop up on this video to learn more. We'll also add links at the end.
And as you come up to that point and say something's off and we're off a plan, it doesn't matter really what caused it in a lot of ways. What you need to do is figure out how you can get back on track. And that's where these things of the idea of the playbooks comes in. Now, playbook is basically a set of standard drills that you would have given a current situation. So, you decide at what point of the day do you decide whether or not you're going to have overtime, or what time do you decide whether you're going to pull people from a different organization or release some people to go help some other areas out. So the playbook really is a way of looking at of taking the decision-making process and standardizing that in advance so that you're not having to come up with an idea on the fly. And of course, if you have a playbook and you're going to talk about shifting people, now you know you have to have the training, the cross-training matrix in place, and you have to have an arrangement with people in a different work area, and you have to have a sequence of who you're going to call for help when you do need to bring people in to augment your team. And you might have to have supervisors trained up on how to run a computer system or how to turn a wrench on a production line to be able to get that responsiveness that you want to be able to manage to your demand. So this is all the how you're going to manage is based on these playbooks. Now, a key here is that you have to have some catch-up capacity to be able to do that. And when I'm talking about catch-up capacity, a lot of people think, oh, we have to be able to work faster. But the fact is, in most organizations, if you have a variation in demand and you have a standard team, you have some extra capacity. And the reason I say that is because it's kind of like that idea of a clock, an old clock with hands on it. Even if it's broken, it's right twice a day. As your demand varies and your staffing stays the same, sometimes you're going to be, as demand passes your staffing at the right point, you'll be balanced. But generally, you can either have too much capacity when demand hits its trough or too little capacity when it hits its peak. And what you find is that in most teams, the queue doesn't grow indefinitely, so somehow they're catching up. But what it means, though, is that if you're doing this speed up and slow down, you're inefficient, you're driving waste into the system. So, you often, when you have a problem, you fall behind, you create more work. So if you're falling behind and you start to get extra customer emails, or if you now have a pile of work coming from the paint shop and you have to figure out how to manage it and get it off the path, the walkways, and figure out a place to store it, all this stuff takes you away from the focus on production. So as you fall behind, you create more work, and when you can figure out how to manage and not fall behind, you eliminate that waste, and suddenly you have a little bit of extra capacity that you're looking for. And the key here is you have to be willing to give up that extra capacity that you find to other teams to be able to get it back from them. So there's a lot of negotiation that goes into daily management, because you have to find a way to create playbooks to manage to that variation. Now, what do you need to do to have in place to get a production board? Well, obviously you have to have a lot of understanding of the demand. There's a lot of information requirements. And the second one here is kind of interesting, because I say a somewhat standardized process. And when I tell people they have to have a standardized process, what happens is they don't try to put daily management in place because their process isn't perfectly standardized. Now, the only thing I want to stress is when you try daily management, what you want to have is enough information that you can make a decision on how long that you expect work to take. And once you get that in place and you can kind of have a good prediction of your capacity, that's probably enough to get started with. If you're so wildly off on how long work takes, you probably want to work on standardizing a little bit before you try a daily management system. And finally, most people already have this, but you want to know your employee status. And an issue here is to make sure you know when throughout the day people are available. When you're talking breaks, or if you're on meetings.
Thanks for watching this extended free version of our Lean Training System module video. If you want to watch the whole video, check it out at Valaction Videos. If you want to make sure you don't miss the next LTS video that we post, please be sure to subscribe down below. We also always appreciate likes, as it helps us get viewed more and makes us keep adding additional content. Thanks for watching, and best wishes on your continuous improvement journey.